What's up, FTFers? You know, there's lots of dumb ways that you could die in a survival scenario. For example, you could be standing on a stage talking to people and get your ear pierced by a polymer wearing metal thing with moving parts. It could happen. And isn't it crazy these days what we can or cannot say anymore? I mean, literally, I'm sitting here thinking about the circus that is evolving in front of us. And content creators, we have to be really careful what we show, what we say. It's getting ludicrous. I mean, pretty soon we're going to be frolicking through daisies, practicing gratitude, manifesting abundance, inspiring creativity and joy by picking up sticks from the ground and banging them together. I mean, with all the misinformation, the disinformation, the bad communication that's out there, I don't feel like I can trust anything or anybody anymore. I guess we're just going to have to resort to what we can control and just grab some popcorn and watch it happen. So let's get to things that we can control. I was thinking the other day, I wonder what Skynet is up to. And it prompted me to ask AI what it thought were the top 10 small but deadly things that could happen to you in a survival scenario, and here's what it came up with. Number 1, dehydration. Yeah, as far as the survival rule of threes, you know, lack of water can quickly become a life-threatening situation, especially if you're in hot or arid conditions. Okay, we're off to a good start. Number 2, infections. Small cuts and wounds can lead to potentially life-threatening scenarios, especially if you go septic. Yeah, I can dig on that. Number 3, hypothermia. Even in mild cold weather, if you're wet or lack of proper clothing, you could certainly die from that. All it takes is a fall or a rise of 2 degrees of your core temperature and you're in serious trouble. So I can agree with that. Number 4, food poisoning. Sure, consuming contaminated food or water can lead to some serious illnesses out there that can eventually lead to your death. Number 5, allergic reactions. Everybody always equates that to like bee stings, but there are certain plants out there and allergens that can really ruin your day. Number 6, insect bites. Mosquitoes, ticks, and other insects can certainly transmit diseases, and so they are a small but deadly threat. Number 7, snake bite. Venomous snakes certainly are a threat in many environments. Of course, the numbers of people that have actually died from them are relatively low, but that's just because they had aftercare after the incident. If you were in a survival scenario and you got bit by a venomous snake, it could be game over, especially depending on where you are in the world. Number 8, sunburn and heat stroke. Sure, overexposure to the sun can create severe burns and heat-related illnesses. Number 9 was plants and fungi. Hey, in survival, we teach everything's edible once. Some plants and fungi are toxic to the point that even if you touch them, you can die from it. And number 10 on the list was improper nutrition. Everybody's watched alone, and relying on a limited diet, even over a short period of time, can have severe health consequences over a long period of time. So after I got this list from AI, I thought, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and interact with it. So I said, you know, hey, that's a really good list of things, but what do you think about cross-contamination? And anybody that has AI knows that when it pauses for a second and then it spits out a ton of information that it's thinking and searching for the answer. Now, what I can tell you word for word, what it said was that this is highly compelling and it should certainly be on the list of the top 10 small but deadly things that can kill you. So the question is, what do you think about that? Skynet is paying attention and we are teaching it.
At any moment, all electronics could cease to function. This includes your car, your home, your business, and our entire electrical infrastructure. Learn how you can protect yourself from a massive electrical disturbance today. Visit www.empro.com or call 833-EMP-PRO4 today.
So that made me close the book on AI that day, and I want to talk a little bit about something, what I think is really one of the worst things that could possibly happen to you, because I see it happen when I go to teach, when I go to events here on YouTube, etc. Cross-contamination is one of the smallest but the most deadly things that could happen to you. So what I want to do today is I want to talk a little bit about cross-contamination and just how serious it can actually become. I'm going to go ahead and give you an example. For the longest time, this has been the standard. It's just a single wall stainless canteen. Even today, most people agree this is still the safest way to disinfect your water. Simply boiling it in a container like this is definitely the way to go. This has been the standard for a very long time. However, things like this have started to become the standard. This is the Ultra Press by Grail. And then one of the reasons that it's so attractive to people is, number one, everything is contained in this one package. You actually have a cup which houses everything. You have the filter and purifier inside of it, and you can gather, filter, purify, and carry your water in less than 30 seconds. On the surface, that seems like this incredible thing, and it is an incredible thing, but we've told you a billion times, you've got to be smarter than the tool itself. So the biggest mistake that I see with these is everybody is absolutely in love with the cup itself. This right here. And we all know how it works. You gather up your dirty water right here that's contaminated, you stick this on here, you go ahead and open it up so you have a valve, a vent on it, and you press this down and it goes ahead and filters and purifies the water for you, which is great because you can usually typically do it in under 11 seconds. And as far as gray man being in a non-permissive environment, that's about as good as it can get. But what I see people do is they don't realize this cup is built in as a redundancy for the system. If the filter should fail, if the purifier should fail, then you always have this backup of being able to boil the water. But people forget about that in the system, and what they do is they end up using the cup as a cup. And one of the things that I try to stress to people out in the field is that because that's where the dirty water goes, that doesn't mean that everything that you put in here is filtered and put into the inner container. Look at how much is left over after our first press. Now, a lot of people would say, Jay, that's not that big of a deal. Well, if you look at it scientifically, let's take our smallest particulate, like let's say a virus at 0.006 microns. How many of those can you fit into a shot glass of water? Now, I want you to think about that for a minute, because it only takes one to get you sick. What I often see is people just get really lucky. They'll go ahead and they'll boil their water for their tea in this cup, and thankfully the heat is what protects them. But they may not realize that when they go to mix up, say, electrolytes, and the water inside of this is cold. And so a lot of people would say, well, that is why they have the valve inside of the Grail, so that you can pour your electrolytes into the inner container and you can drink them from there. But what I have found is that anything that has a sweetener in it can certainly go sour. And so that presents a whole nother set of challenges and problems. You have to drink it down immediately, you have to rinse it out, and you just have to stay on top of it in general. So to have to deal with that, a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll get a nesting cup that they'll use with their Grail. So let's put this back and we'll look at this kit now. Now, y'all have seen me carry this kit many times in the past. This is a great kit, but there is something that you have to be aware of. So at the center of this is the Grail itself. This is the GeoPress. And inside of this kit, I have my pre-filter. And then inside of the carrier, I also have this redundant stainless steel cup. And so when people see that kit, they say, oh, that's great, right? Because you can nest everything together and it saves space in your kit and allows you to carry the other things that you need to carry. However, there is one thing that is glaringly obvious to people like me, is that this pre-filter is what houses the infected water first before it goes into the container on this Grail, where I can then take this filter, release the vent, and I can press it down, and then all the clean water is inside of the inner sleeve. Well, that's great and everything, but here's the problem with that. So we go through and we do the exact same thing with the GeoPress that we do with the Ultra Press. It takes about 11 seconds to purify it. And then the inside of this is clean. But then we take that sleeve and we slide it onto the grail. And where do we put it? Inside of our cup. Now, people like me, we realize that. That means that somehow we have to sterilize this cup before we use it. And if you're not aware of it, well, you could get sick. So a lot of people ask me, well, what do you do, right? Because you have options. I mean, you could utilize some resources that you brought with you, like say soap or maybe your baby wipes or whatever it is that you have. But once you've used those resources up, they have to be replaced. And so now it's a matter of, okay, well, whatever resources I have around me, I have to have a knowledge of them. There has to be an abundance of them, and I have to know what to do with them. So one of the best ways to disinfect a vessel like this is just with heat. You can use a stove, like a Vargo stove or possibly a Solo stove or maybe one of the little gas stoves, etc. But when I'm doing survival challenges and stuff, I typically just take this cup and I'll put it into the coals, not the fire. I'll put it into the coals, and most, pathogens and viruses, bacteria, etc., they die somewhere between 160 and 180 degrees. And most people don't know that. That's why we use the water boiling technique, so that we have a visual, so that we know for sure that we killed those pathogens. Other than that, there's other things that we can do. There are certain plants like broadleaf plantain, for example. I'll typically gather up a bunch of them. I'll throw it into this vessel. I'll add in some clean water and go ahead and break up the leaves, and it's antifungal, antibacterial, antiseptic. It has a lot of great qualities that will help so that I can wash my hands. I can wash my knife after I've cut up an animal. I can wash myself, I can wash my cookware, I can wash the knife. But there's not always stuff like that available. One of the other things that I use is yucca, for example. I have done videos in the past showing how to do it, but you basically break up the fibers and you add a little bit of water, and there's saponin in there, and it creates this like soapy stuff, just like soap when you're washing your hands in the sink. And I use that for cleaning myself and for cleaning my cookware, my knives, etc. What you see us do most of the time is after we've eaten, we typically go down to a creek and we use, the sand and silt and some of the vegetation around us, and you see us just cleaning it out. And then we rinse it out with the dirty water in the creek, and then we just stick everything back together. What we don't tell you is how we make sure that we don't cross-contaminate the next time that we use it. And I think that's basically doing you a disservice. Now, a lot of people are just not aware of what cross-contamination is. It's when you have bacteria and pathogens, etc., on a substance or a surface, and you transfer it to another. And let's face it, some of the worst outbreaks in history of disease or plagues were caused by bad hygiene and cross-contamination. And in a survival scenario where hygiene and resources are limited, your chance for cross-contamination increases significantly. Understanding how to prevent it is crucial for maintaining your health. Another thing that I see is people will use their bandana or their shamog for everything, right? They'll use it to, pre-filter their water. They'll use it for washing themselves or even their cookware, their knife, and then they get injured and they're going to use it to take care of that injury, which is fine and dandy and everything, as long as you can get them to a hospital so they can get the correct amount of care that they need, getting pumped full of antibiotics, for example, at the hospital. But in a survival scenario, this ain't going to cut it. Thankfully, most survival scenarios are under 72 hours, but let's say that you were there for an extended period of time. You would have to be extremely mindful of how you use this. There are little bitty things that we do as survival instructors that, we constantly have to remind ourselves to tell people about, because we just take it for granted. Like one of the things that I do with my bandanas or my shamogs is I will hang them up and let the smoke and the heat dry them out. Now, this isn't as good as sticking it into the washing machine and then into the dryer, but when you're out in the wild, that is what you have to do. And it shouldn't be limited to just this piece of cloth. That goes for you as well. I'm sure that everybody has heard about the Native American smoke bath before. And that's something that we all do when we're sitting around the campfire. We make sure that we try to kill off some of this bacteria by utilizing smoke. The thing is, most people think, well, over a short period of time, it's not really that big of a deal, but it could be for sure. Let's say that you cut a piece of wood and you made yourself a little table and you started cleaning the fish. So you've got your knife, right? You're touching it. You've got the fish on the wood. You do your work, make your fillet, etc. If you stick that knife back into the sheath, you've contaminated it after just one use. Not to mention your hands. Now they're dirty and you go to touch something like your water bottle, and guess what? You have cross-contaminated. I've even seen people take that exact same piece of wood, they'll cook the game, the fish, whatever it is over the fire, and then they put it right back onto their little table that they made. The thing is that in survival, every little thing, it takes intention. You have to make sure, you have to be hyper vigilant that you take care of these things. And it is a serious inconvenience. Most of the time when people come to a class and they realize like, oh my God, I've got to do all of these things, they all of a sudden become aware like this is a really big pain in the butt and I have to actually stop and think about what I'm doing. Cross-contamination is a serious but often overlooked aspect of survival. By following proper hygiene practices and being mindful of how you handle your food and how you handle your water, and even when you store it together, you're gonna significantly increase the chance of you staying alive and healthy. Because a lot of people don't realize that when you're in a situation like that, you have an incredible amount of stress. And if you're immunocompromised, your body, it just simply can't fight off all of those illnesses. Then your problems are compounded. And you may get lucky and you may get in a situation that's under, 72 hours, and then you can go to the hospital to get the care that you need afterwards. But it's that one time, especially when you don't want it to happen, that something like this occurs. But in closing, I want to know what is, in y'all's top 10 list of the small but deadly things that could kill you in a survival situation. What are the things that are often overlooked that you do not see talked about here on channels like this? So y'all like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And until next time, keep fueling those fires. If you're listening to this broadcast, you are the resistance. To stay in the know, subscribe to the new Survival Dispatch News channel.
Do it now!